The scorched fragment of hull plating had a weight to it that surprised him every time he picked it up, heavier than its size suggested, like the metal remembered what it had survived. Admiral Kelthane turned it over in his palm on the observation deck of a ship that would never again fly as his flagship, and somewhere behind him, a diplomatic aide was waiting to tell him the treaty had a signature on it now. He did not turn around yet. He wanted one more minute with the question that had been sitting in his chest for 6 months. How does an empire that has never lost a war learn, in half a year, exactly what losing looks like? It began with silence, not shots, 9 supply convoys gone dark in a single cycle, and no wreckage to show for it. Tactical Officer Yenna delivered the 9th report with her tentacles curled tight against her skull, and Intelligence Chief Ralla, 3 heads speaking in the same clipped rhythm, corrected the room's easy assumption that this was piracy. Pirates didn't strike 7 systems on the same clock. Pirates didn't break Valorian encryption just to fill the fleet's channels with human music during a troop movement, or leave hand-painted taunts on the hulls of ships they disabled instead of destroyed. Supreme Admiral Kelthane arrived to that briefing already tired, 30 years and 17 campaigns behind him, medals across a chest that felt heavier by the week. An entire garrison, 3,000 troops, had gone silent at Forward Base 17. The recovery team found every soldier breathing, unharmed and unconscious, and every weapon in the armory gone. Scrawled across the wall in what the analysts confirmed was human handwriting. Gratitude for the toys, signed simply Earth. Nothing in Valorian doctrine accounted for an enemy that fought like this. 8 centuries of conquest had trained the Empire to read patterns, supply routes, chain of command, drill discipline, and exploit the gaps. Humanity had no gaps to find because it refused to hold a shape long enough to be studied. Diplomatic overtures came back worse than they were sent. An envoy returned unconscious with a professional tattoo he hadn't agreed to and a heart condition he hadn't known about, both gifts of the same visit. A Valorian operative captured behind human lines had instead walked into a command post uninvited, asked politely for coffee, and left with the staff unconscious and the base's lunch supply gone. Kelthin's own analysts confirmed the casualty math and asked him to check it twice. 11,000 Valorian dead or wounded across 6 months, and only 43 of them killed by direct human hands. The rest had died to their own equipment, their own bad intelligence, their own paranoia, fed, quietly and precisely, by an enemy that never had to fire a shot to win the exchange. He understood the shape of it, fully only once his own dreadnought went dark around him. 7 small craft had dropped out of hyperspace at close range, and every gun on the Infinite Glory answered at once, full spread, saturation fire, more ordnance than the maneuver should have survived. Not one shot connected. The human ships moved like they already knew where the beams would be before the triggers were pulled, weaving clean through a wall of fire that should have erased them. Within 90 seconds half, the fleet had gone deaf and blind. Comms and sensors stripped out with surgical precision, while hulls and engines were left untouched. Then the forward display lit without Kelthane's authorization, and a face filled it. Young, dark-haired, grinning like she'd interrupted a party rather than a battle. Lieutenant Commander Harper Vale, Earth Coalition Problem Resolution Division, she said. Sorry about shooting back. You really should have taken our call first. Terrible manners, opening fire before anyone said hello. You've brought 7 ships against an Imperial dreadnought, Kelthane said. That's not strategy, that's a death wish. It's an introduction. Her grin didn't slip, but something under it went flat and exact. Earth didn't send you its army, Admiral. We sent you us, the ones the regular military can't use, because we don't do orders well and we like our violence creative. One by one, the rest of her crew crowded onto the split feed. A hacker grateful for the career change from federal prison, a soldier discharged for enjoying combat too openly, a man who called himself a reformed terrorist with better benefits now. The last face offered no joke at all, just a name and a stillness that made Kelthin's mouth go dry. 43 kills in 6 months, Harper said, watching the number land on him. Everything else you did to yourselves because we fed your own people just enough bad information to finish the job for us. We could have buried you in bodies by now, Admiral. We didn't, because a war nobody survives isn't a war anybody wins. Take that back to your Emperor. Keep pushing, and you get the war we've been holding back. Or land somewhere sane, and this stops being funny for both of us. The feed went dark, and the infinite glory drifted, blind and disarmed, back toward the nearest repair yard. 3 days later, in the War Council chamber on Valoria Prime, Emperor Tyvex watched the recording of that transmission twice before he spoke. "They sent us criminals," he said, mostly to himself. "They sent us exactly what would frighten us most, Your Majesty," Intelligence Director Pelthar answered. "While we chased ghosts through the outer colonies, their real fleet has been under construction. Energy signatures near their homeworld our instruments can't classify. 4 months, perhaps 5, before it's ready." Grand General Morak didn't dress up the arithmetic. "Escalate now, and I give us a 60% chance of eventual victory at a cost of 70 to 80% of the fleet, with an occupation we likely couldn't hold afterward. Negotiate today, and we lose only face." Around that table, even the officers who had spent careers arguing for more war reached the same conclusion. Pride didn't rebuild a fleet, and the Empire couldn't afford to spend what was left on proving a point. Kelthin stood before his Emperor, his command effectively finished, and said the thing no one else in the room seemed willing to. "I don't think they're chaos, Your Majesty. I think they built restraint and wore it as madness, so we'd assume the worst about what they were holding back and beg for peace before they ever had to prove it." Tyvex studied him a long moment, something between contempt and respect, then named him to lead the negotiation, since, as the Emperor put it, there was nothing left of Kelthin's career to protect. The station where the treaty talks convened had outlived 1,000 wars and held no particular loyalty to this one. Ambassador Patricia Holden sat across the table, composed and grey at the temples, nothing like the storm Kelthin had braced for, while behind her, arms folded along the back wall in full armor, Harper Vale's unit stood as a reminder of what the calm was covering. "We don't want your empire on its knees, Admiral," Patricia said. "We want borders that hold. Full withdrawal, a demilitarized buffer, trade terms, and since your forces erased a colony of 12,000 civilians at New Perth, reparations, and an apology from your emperor, formally given." "More mercy than we offered you," Kelthen admitted. "Mercy's cheaper than a second war." Her eyes didn't move off him. From the wall, Harper added, almost cheerfully, that a repeat of New Perth would mean the ambassador wasn't the one he'd be talking to next time, and Patricia told her, without turning, to behave, to which Harper replied that standing quietly in armor was, in fact, her version of behaving. Kelthin read the terms twice and found no trap folded into them, only an ending built to cost both sides less than continuing would. He carried them home, and Tyvex signed the Treaty of New Geneva 2 weeks later before both civilizations' cameras, Harper's unit long since gone, deployed to whatever fire needed smothering next. Which brought him back to the fragment in his palm, and the aide still waiting behind him with the signed documents. Kelthin closed his fingers around the scorched metal, the last piece of the ship that had once made him feel unbeatable, and understood that the Empire hadn't been outfought at all. It had been shown, patiently and on purpose, exactly how much worse losing could have been, and allowed to choose peace before it had to find out.